Hey guys, welcome to Storytime with Jester. Tonight we will be continuing the saga of Andor and his companions in the Book of Prophecies, picking up chapter 89, where we left off last week. It had been 15 years since Ulrich had fled the temple with Pedius and company. In that time, he had done nothing to address the evil he found there, not so much as a word of warning. It was as if it had never happened. Since returning from the cursed desert, he had been quite busy. The king of Novgorod had parceled out land on the eastern frontier and granted Ulrich a portion of it. For 5 years, Ulrich saw to the construction of a castle he would call home. He then helped repel an invasion force from the north and teamed back up with the female elf Viril to go on a quest to the great southern swamp, where he nearly died battling Baba Yaga. On the return trip, they befriended a clan of dwarves, sacked a temple dedicated to a demon lord, and destroyed a cult that worshipped Doom. That was 2 years ago. Viril's appearance at the tournament in Novgorod had floored Ulrich. How was she alive? When he greeted her, she acted like she knew him not. However, when he sent word to her years later requesting she accompany him on his quest, she came. Always in the back of his mind was his friend Pedius. What had happened to him? Like his inexplicable avoidance of the Temple of Doom, so was his suppression of any thoughts about Pedius. Until, that is, his run-in with Doom's cultists. That single event seemed to flood his mind with thoughts of the temple and the sudden disappearance of his friend. No longer held at bay, the thoughts overwhelmed him so that for the next year and a half he did nothing but pray to his God for forgiveness, wisdom, knowledge, and strength. Finally, he received a vision of an evil temple far to the north, at the outer fringes of the Duchy of Crane. He was to make the journey alone. Worried that he was not up to the task, he was assured that he would be provided that necessary to succeed along the way. Chapter 90. Ulrich had somehow managed to avoid the hordes of undead that had flooded the duchy and overran it. He had been warned by a patrol from Beneek to turn back, as the army of the dead was almost upon them. When he declined and told them of his destination, they advised him to keep to the wilderness, as his chances of survival were greater in the forest and mountains than anywhere else. Heeding their advice, he continued his journey through the Turnavo forest and into the Karawanks mountains. It was there, in the upper Karawanks, that he met Redeem. He had just managed a treacherous outcropping, treacherous, that is, to those unskilled in rock climbing, and was slowly descending into a ravine where large boulders dotted the bottom, giving Ulrich the impression that some large dragon had flown over at some point and deposited its waste that solidified where it struck the ground. He glanced upward, as if somehow expecting to see such a beast and thereby giving him the chance to dodge for cover lest he be struck by one of the falling balls of excrement. It was then, as his eyes were diverted upward, that he heard a strange melody flowing through the ravine. As he listened closely, he could almost make out individual gravelly voices through the eerie harmony. He scanned the ravine floor for signs of the source of this music, but found none. Perhaps the sound he was hearing came from behind the boulders. He approached cautiously, not wanting to interrupt the music, but at the same time being prepared to defend himself against the likes of a siren or a harpy. As he rounded the cluster of boulders, he saw a lone figure standing, facing him. It was like the figure was forewarned to his presence in the ravine. "That was a lovely tune," Ulrich said. "Was that you?" The figure was about 6 feet in height, wearing green robes and a bright yellow cloak. He wore a green skull cap that was popular among wizards, and had red tattoos on his face. A kind of tribal marking, Ulrich thought. When the figure spoke, his voice was deep and imposing. "No, I did not make that music you heard." "Where did it come from, then?" Ignoring Ulrich's question, he said, "I am Redeem. Who is it that stands before me?" "I am Ulrich. Did you see who was singing? He pressed. Continuing to ignore any reference to the source of the music, Redeem said, Are you he that was foretold? Foretold? Ulrich asked, confused. By whom? I have been waiting here for the Lightbringer. Are you he? Ulrich's nerves were on end now, preparing to defend against an attack from Redeem if one was to come. What is your business with the Lightbringer when you find him? Are you he? It depends. What were you foretold would identify the Lightbringer as being such? He would possess the means to destroy the darkness that has befallen this land. Drawing his sword and activating one of the gems on his helm, Ulrich caused the ravine to fill with the radiance of the sun, causing Redeem to shield his eyes lest he be blinded. Is this what you mean? Ulrich asked as he sheathed his sunblade and deactivated his helm. Ulrich almost expected to see a look of awe and reverence from Redeem, but instead received one of blankness. You are the one, Redeem said flatly. We must make haste. Follow me. Chapter 91. The combined armies of Folkrich and Varag marched through Novgorod on their way to the kingdom of the dead. Varag had hoped to add the prowling lions to her ranks, but the Novgorians had already gone south to face the hordes of undead that threatened their kingdom. When they finally caught up to the army of Novgorod, the sight before their eyes was that of a carnal house. The hordes of undead were swarming over the prowling lions, bringing back horrific memories to the members of the protectors that had witnessed what the insect swarm had done to Hawkeye. The weapons possessed by the courageous defenders seemed to have little to no effect on the army of the dead. Those that were holding their ground were quickly set upon by overwhelming numbers, or engulfed in a cloud emanating from one of the 6 purple-robed figures. When the cloud dissipated, those that had been trapped within its icy cold death fell to the ground. Moments later, they stood back up, joining the ranks of the undead. Pantera, emotionless in his own state of undeath, ordered a charge. His humanoid army, lusting for battle, rushed towards the carnage with a crazed glee. They hit the ongoing melee with the force of a tidal wave, knocking back the hordes of undead and giving the beleaguered Novgorians a momentary reprieve. From Pantera's vantage point, the battle looked like 2 giant armies of ants, as over 150,000 combatants fought to the death. The army of Folkrich stayed back in reserve, Prince Thomas's knights ready to ride into battle at his command. The protectors, astride their hippogriffs, kept their distance from the rest of the field as Andor surveyed the battle. He was no strategist, but he knew the purple-robed figures had to be taken out. Eric left command of his cavalry unit to a senior officer and rode to join Andor's group. As he drew near, he pulled up his warhorse and dismounted, walking the rest of the way while leaving his mount in the care of his squire. It is good to see you, old friend, Andor greeted Eric. The rest of the protectors echoed Andor's sentiments. We have brought the rods, Andor said as he displayed his rod of power. Do you have the wand? I will not be joining you this day. Oh, excuse me. I will not be joining you this day, Eric replied, a tone of regret in his voice. My duty lies with the men in my charge. I wanted to see you all before we entered this. He paused, looking back upon the chaos, then back to his friends, and then directly to Andor as he said, May St. Columba protect you. Without another word, and without waiting for a response, he turned and walked back to his warhorse. Riding back to the army, he rejoined his unit and awaited orders from the king. What was left of the Novgorian army mustered alongside of King Friedrich's force. They confirmed that a large portion of the undead army was unaffected by weapons not bearing enchantments. A good number of Prince Thomas's cavalry unit possessed such weapons, but the majority of the army from Folkrich did not. The battle was taking a turn for the worse for Pantera's humanoids. The center was breaking up, and it was easy to tell now which of the undead had the immunity to normal weapons. King Friedrich arranged his force and that of the Novgorians in 3 segments, the center being Prince Thomas's cavalry that possessed magical weapons, with the Novgorians on the left supported by the rest of the cavalry, and the remainder of the king's force on the right. Prince Thomas led out his cavalry at a trot. King Friedrich drew his sword and followed with the rest of the army. As their force went to join the battle, the protectors took to the sky, leaving only Varag and Pantera remaining. The purple-robed figures commanded their strongest legions to break off from the main battle and advance towards the new threat. The army of the dead was not like armies of the living. They had no strategy other than overwhelming the opposition in sheer numbers. They were like raging barbarians in ferocity and utter lack of self-preservation. Once given the command to attack King Friedrich's army, they ran head-on as quickly as their spasmodic bodies allowed, leaving their lesser versions behind to continue battling the humanoids. It was then that Prince Thomas gave the order to charge. His cavalry galloped towards the undead menace with lances pointed skyward. As they neared the mass of bodies, they lowered their lances and urged their mounts into a burst of speed. The piercing wall of death met the hordes of undeath with devastating force. King Friedrich then called for a charge of the remainder of his army. The right, led by the king, crashed into the enemy who was still battling the humanoids. Likewise, the Novgorodians hit the left, while the cavalry led by Eric the Good circled around in a flanking maneuver. Seeing the havoc Prince Thomas's knights were causing, the purple-robed figures focused all their powers on the center. Standing together, they unleashed the power of doom. Lightning crackled above as their bodies started to glow blue in color, electrical energy flowing through them and spreading out among Prince Thomas's cavalry. Knight and horse alike fell to the ground as the blue radiance surrounded them in a death shroud. The protectors flew over the battle, casting spells and firing arrows from the safety that being airborne afforded them, all except Andor. Seeing the purple-robed figures in such close proximity to each other, he had Truth take him to within striking distance of his staff. As he was dismounting, he caught a glimpse on the rise where Varag and Pantera were, perched atop their horses. Taking his staff in both hands, he held it out towards the 6 purple-robed figures. The talisman atop the staff started to glow as Andor began invoking the power of St. Columba. He lifted the staff high in the air and then brought his hands downward, slamming the base of the staff into the ground. The earth rumbled and began tearing apart as large cracks appeared and snaked towards each of the purple-robed figures, widening as they drew near. As the cracks reached Doom's high priests, the earth suddenly stopped its assault, the rifts ending mere inches from the Lich's feet. The talisman flashed a blinding light and exploded in 1,000 shards, splintering the staff and throwing Andor to the ground. As he lay there, his body began to fade, becoming ghost-like, until after but a moment he disappeared entirely. And that, my friends, I'm going to leave it there. We will pick back up next week with Chapter 92. I hope you enjoyed tonight's reading, and I appreciate you watching this channel. Please make sure that you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell, and share with all your friends so they too can enjoy this channel. Also, I don't have a tip jar or Patreon account, so if you would like to support this channel, you can purchase the book that I am reading to you, the Book of Prophecies. It is available in hardback, paperback, and ebook formats, and you can find those links in the About section of this channel. You can also find these same links if you go to my Facebook page, James Richmond Author, and like I said, the links are in the About section of that as well. So that wraps up tonight's reading. Thanks for watching, and until next time, and as always, see you soon.